Welcome to another Airbrush Asylum video. This is part 2 of the Joker tutorial. So if you haven't already, go check out part 1. I'll pop a link in the description to that one for you. Now we're going to continue to render the Joker's face. Now I'm working on the eye. I've got sepia brown. This is Createx illustration colors. And I'm utilizing the paper template that I made in part 1. And I'm just spraying in my darker values. The airbrush that I'm using at the moment is the Iwata CMSB Micron. This has a 0.18mm needle. And you'll notice that I'm not trying to saturate the surface all in one hit. I'm building up my tone. So spraying a little bit lighter and then gradually going darker. This is also just a good tip for whenever you're spraying anything with the airbrush, just go light and you can always go darker. It's very hard to go the opposite. So now I'm switching to moss green and I'm just adding a bit of that in around the ear section where the hair lays over some parts of the ear. And I'm also continuing with the moss green and just establishing some of the areas of where that hair's got to go. And now I've lifted up that paper template and I'm just freehanding in some flesh tone just to establish my base color for the ear, and I will render on top of that. Now switching back to sepia brown, I'm going to start to add the direction of the hair and pull out some of those shadows. So it's going to look a little bit messy at the moment, but you know, it'll go ahead and clean all this up at a later stage. Remember, there are 5 parts to this video, so this is still only part 2. We're not even halfway through yet. So spraying on the edge of that jawline there, just to pick up that nice sharp edge. So you'll notice there I've got the paper template secured with some little magnets. You should be able to find these little magnets in like those cheap sort of, in Australia we call them $2 shops. Also art supply shops will probably have them, so just even look in the stationery section of an office supply area, they should have them as well. I'll pop some links in the description below to products used within this video, and I'll see if I can find these magnets or something similar which I can pop in that link for you and should help you out. So you'll see here that I have done a little bit more texturing in the eye. So basically that was done with the eraser pencil. Sorry, the part of that film I had to cut out. It wasn't good enough to put in, so I just want to make you aware of that. So now coming back in with the paper template and just removing certain areas just to really get some of those dark spots sprayed in for the hair, as you can see there. And switching back to flesh, I'm going to spray in on the side of the head, so where the makeup is sort of going back towards the skin color. So it's kind of the makeup's obviously sitting predominantly on the front of the face, and then you can start to see a little bit of that skin around the area nearest to the hair. So that's what that flesh was for. So now removing that, and you can see where we're at so far. You can see that bit of flesh sprayed in. And now I'm coming in with the detail black. And I'm going to start getting a bit of texturing happening. So to achieve this, I am utilizing the Microdot template by Dru Blair. This is available from schoolofrealism.com. I'll also pop a link in the description for that, so you can go check it out, and if you want one you can grab one from there. It's extremely handy. Great for this particular purpose, to establish texture in a makeup sort of artwork, but it also works really well for, you know, pitting in skulls, and it definitely has a variety of uses, so a very handy template to own. So using my CMC Plus micron now with the 0.23mm needle, I'm just utilizing that detail black. So detail black, this is just made up, I've made it up with a bit of transparent base, quite a bit of black pigment. The reason I've used transparent base is because I don't want it to opaque over all the texture that I've created. And added quite a bit of reducer as well, just so that it's extremely thin, so it can, you know, perform really nicely at low pressure. Using that Mac valve, I can get a nice fine detail coming out of the brush. Another tip is, if your paint is a bit older or it's been sitting around for a while, mix it all up and then strain it into your airbrush. So even the tiniest little bit of build up, you know, from the paint sitting, or even you know, when it sits, the paint dries up on the top of the caps, and that then drops into your paint. Well, that's enough to start to clog it, and it'll give you all sorts of dramas. So make sure that it's always nice and clean. If you aren't using a fresh bottle, it's always a good idea to strain it. Working on some of the eyebrows now. So freehanding them in and utilizing that template so I know where I'm going with it. Because as you may have noticed, I haven't sketched the actual Joker onto this at all, this piece of synthetic paper. It's just using the paper templates, cutting out all the areas and spraying them in. And once I have my values, then I basically utilize my reference to add in the shading, and obviously add the highlights in using the dowel and the eraser pencil, and also the blade. So now going ahead and removing that paper template to expose the eyebrow section, you can see where I've added the detail black around the eye, and now it's time to go back to texturing. I'm starting off with the dowel to get some of those really heavy texture marks within the makeup. So essentially the dowel is just removing the paint now. So Createx Illustration Colors allows you to manipulate the paint. It doesn't cross-link as quickly as other paints, so you have a window where you can erase it. The longer you let it dry, a lot of the time you can get a different sort of effect. If you spray it on and erase it straight away, it's going to come off pretty quickly and straight back to the white of the page. So just depends on what effect you're going for. And if this is the first time checking out one of my videos, welcome. For all our regular viewers, welcome back. I do appreciate you watching, and I hope you're enjoying it so far. If you haven't already, feel free to hit subscribe, tap on that bell icon. That will notify you every time I put out new content, and by all means give it a thumbs up if you do like this video, and share it out to anyone that you think might benefit from this particular content, and that way we can help to continue to build this airbrushing community together. So after completing a bit of the texturing, working back in with the airbrush, just to start to really add a few deeper shadows. And the reason again that I'm working like this is because I'm doing little pieces at a time so that the paint doesn't fully cure. That way I've got the time to manipulate it. So play around with this depending on what artwork you're doing, the size of the artwork, how quick you work, will all depend on how larger the area is that you are working on. But I tend to enjoy focusing on one particular area, build my texturing, render it all from there, and then I can move on to the next. So just continuing to add more detail, so utilizing my reference so that I know where I'm going with it. Now a lot of the techniques that you'll notice that I'm using in this particular project, i.e. the scratching, the use of the blade, the dowel, these were shown to me by Dru Blair. So if you do want to learn exactly how to create photorealism artwork, then I highly recommend you enroll in one of Dru's classes. He teaches all over the world. We're fortunate enough to host him for many years here in Australia, and yeah, I've learnt a lot. This is my adaptation of what I've learnt from him, but if you really want to master this technique and photorealism, then there is no better person to learn from than Dru Blair. Again, schoolofrealism.com for all of his classes, so again the link will be in the description below. So again, utilizing the dowel to create more of that texturing around the eye. So it is a slow process, but definitely worth it in the end. It just allows for a much more realistic look once completed. And remember, I'm not using any white paint. This is all just paint sprayed on, and then I'm removing for the highlights. Now working back over the top again with my detail black. So I'm also sort of stippling now with the airbrush. I'm not just spraying directly over the texture that I've created. So by having that balance of harsh texture, i.e. the sections that were removed directly with the dowel, and then the softer spray from the airbrush, it's going to give it a better illusion of texture and depth. Again, continuing to add more and more detail, texturing within the eye section. So trying not to eliminate over some of the brighter highlights, leaving them in place so that I know exactly where they are. If I do get a bit overspray on them, I can easily remove that later, but I'm just trying to avoid extra work if necessary. Now switching back to dark blue. Now if you are unsure again on how this was mixed, this was done with equal parts of cobalt blue and viridian. And I'm just adding some of that blue into the area of the eyebrow, just to give it the impression that there's makeup underneath those eyebrows and it's kind of like clumped up on the eyebrow hairs. I've also come in with a bit of detail black just to deepen some of those shadows and add another layer so that I can create some more scratching. So that's a good way to kind of reactivate a part which is dried up. You can spray back over it and then begin your scratching again. Now keep in mind it's pretty much only going to activate the colour that you've put down. So everything underneath should still remain, and if you do want to try and scratch that off, you're going to have to be a lot more aggressive with it. But it kind of just allows you to create that layer and then you're working on top of the previous one, so you kind of eliminate what's underneath regardless. So now I'm switching to my Faber-Castell eraser pencil, so utilizing both the pink and the white end. And this is going to give me a softer highlight depending on what I'm trying to achieve, rather than the harshness from the dowel. So coming back in with my detail black, just adding some of the softer shading to start to 3D the nose and deepen some of the shadows around the eye and where the makeup is meeting so the under eye makeup, that blue section is meeting the white makeup on the face. As you can see, I'm still adding texturing even with the airbrush, and then I'm going to come back in and utilize my texturing techniques to further detail those areas. So continuing with the eraser pencil there. And you can really see now that that highlight is a lot softer than utilizing the dowel. I'm also using the eraser pencil around the edge of that nose section just to clean up the overspray. So you can see that's only a little bit of overspray, but that's obviously already dried because that was done previously. But it still comes off relatively easily because there is not a lot of build up on there. If that was a lot heavier, well then it's going to be harder to erase, okay? And just continuing with the texturing. So just remember to keep checking your reference so that you're accurate with your highlights. If you do make a mistake, well, you can just spray back down onto it and remanipulate that area. That's the beauty of this synthetic paper, it's extremely forgiving. It's so forgiving that if you do actually make an extreme mistake, you can spray a bit of glass cleaner on there, anything with ammonia, and that's going to take it right back to the white of the paper. The only thing you have to be aware of is if you do that, wherever you've textured, and especially with the dowel, you'll probably have some of those indentations and scratch marks and all that sort of stuff. It just depends on how much paint was on there protecting the base of the paper, but just keep that in mind. But it can definitely be removed right back to the white. So coming back in with the dowel now to get some of those harsher highlights, you'll notice I'm really taking note of the direction. So obviously the highlights that I'm doing currently are more sort of dotty and spotty, whereas the other ones are near my thumb there, just underneath in that section between the nose and the mouth. They are more directional. So that's pretty much wrapping up part 2 of this 5-part tutorial series. I look forward to seeing you in part 3. Until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Take care. Bye for now.